Welcome back to the PS Pub. Like many of you watching, I too grew up on a lot of those old Scooby-Doo cartoons, and I do have a soft spot for the character and a lot of those old Hannah Montana, and a lot of the Hanna-Barbera characters in general. I haven't kept up with really anything Scooby-Doo related since like the mid-2000s if I'm honest, but I'd be lying if I didn't say I was a bit nostalgic seeing Scoob and the Gang had their own PSP game, one I knew I had to try. No drinks today, but I did grab myself a nice sub. So how does this game hold up? Well, we're gonna find out today. Scooby-Doo Who's Watching Who was released on October 11, 2006 for both the PSP and DS, with the PSP version being developed by Savage Entertainment with Humansoft in charge of development on the DS, with THQ publishing the games. The game sees Mystery Inc. teaming up with the team of ghost hunters named GSI as they work together to solve a series of mysteries. The narrative itself is framed like it's a series of episodes to a reality TV show throughout the course of an entire season. It reminds me a lot of the ghost hunting and /or debunking reality TV shows from the mid and late 2000s that were all the rage at the time. I should know because I did watch quite a few of them both on the believer and debunking side, be it ghosts, cryptids, or whatever. You know, stuff that they'd have on the History Channel / Nat Geo, etc. back then and to an even greater extent today. Still, that sort of premise for a Scooby-Doo video game isn't a bad idea, and even adding in the reality TV element just did what the Scooby-Doo brand does most consistently, and that's blending well with modern-day entertainment of the time. Well, mostly consistent.
On TV shows, the malt shop owner is always a friendly black man or a spicy and meatball Italian.
Oh God, no!
Having Scoob and the Gang team up with a ghost hunting team to solve mysteries is a fun idea, especially in hindsight now looking back through a nostalgic lens at the rage of reality TV in the late 2000s. GSI scoffs at the idea of working with Mystery Inc. from the start, but that competitive drive does sort of work here. Albeit, I've never been, and I'm not the biggest fan of putting Mystery Inc. as the quote-unquote underdogs in any story. As fans, we see them time and time again solve mysteries, so rivalries like this, to me at least, don't really completely work. Anytime, even as a kid, trying to put over no-names like they're superior to Mystery Inc., to me wouldn't work. Still, I'm getting off topic. I won't run through case by case because I'd really just be repeating myself as the story mostly follows the same beats. Mystery Inc. and GSI go to a quote-unquote haunted location, and after their investigation they catch a perp, all culminating at the very end capturing the pseudo-mastermind of the entire experience. I'll talk a bit more on this in a bit, but it follows the archetypical story of a typical Scooby-Doo show or movie, so on that front, I think it absolutely succeeds. So let's start with the best. However, just up front, there is going to be a few caveats even in this section that I will talk about. But right off the bat, the menus and presentation in general are pretty great. The main menu is visually appealing and is very dynamic looking. It has that cartoony vibe that blends right in with the Scooby-Doo series, and it just works. The music and sound effects are also good here, with that spooky, cartoony music mixed with the silly slapstick sound effects. It works in making you feel like you're a part of the Scooby-Doo experience. The only exception here being Oceanland's theme, which I just thought was awesome in general. Not to mention, the game features a fully voiced cast of characters, from Mystery Inc. all the way down to the various suspects. I was a bit surprised at first, but I thought it was pretty cool that they had taken the time to voice pretty much everything in the game. Not to mention, there are quite a few fully voiced cutscenes in the game. As a matter of fact, each time you start and end a new case, you get a cutscene, and every time you enter a new level, you also get a cutscene, which I think is pretty awesome. It gives each level purpose and context as to what and why you are there. However, where the game gets a few points docked is that oftentimes these cutscenes will just start abruptly and end abruptly. Seriously, the opening setting up GSI is a great example of this.
Look, yippee!
Then the next time we see the two groups, they are already on the show. No context or build up aside from the 3 seconds we see Mystery Inc. just watching the show. Or just check out this scene from the abandoned airfield.
Come on, everyone. Let's take a tour of the base.
Look for clues.
Mainly the kind that aren't scary and are like tasty. Yum!
There's almost no time to breathe or get ready for what you're about to watch or what you're going to do after. Still, the art style here is really good. It captures that art style of mid-2000s Scooby-Doo quite well, and the levels all have that cel-shaded look that does fit Scooby-Doo. Overall, the graphics and presentation are the high points here, despite having a few issues here and there. On the surface, Scooby-Doo Who's Watching Who visually passes, but what's the game look like under the hood, so to speak? Well, for better or worse, that's where things start to get interesting.
Where are we?
We took a left turn at Weirdsville and ended up in Creepy Town.
Yeah, creepy!
Sheriff Buddy McDowell, this is your county. It should be peaceful and quiet, and yet residents complain about rising burglary. And now, alien invasion.
Spoiler warnings from here on out. The story sees the show Mystery Inc. is a part of investigate 5 different cases: the Haunted Hotel, Sugarland, Abandoned Airfield, Ocean Park, and the Wolf's Club. Each mystery is set up as a level with a main hub and smaller levels that you unlock by collecting dog tags in the main hub. However, after entering in one of the smaller levels and returning to the main hub, you'll need to collect dog tags again starting from 0. It's a little confusing as they could have just had a running total in the hub, and the more dog tags you collect unlock the sub-levels, like Donkey Kong 64 or something like that. This actually does tie into one of the bigger issues I have overall with the game, and I guess I can start here. A lot of the elements just feel sloppy or hastily put together. It's not that annoying to collect 15 dog tags again, but it just seems redundant because you'll just collect the same dog tags over and over again in order to unlock different levels. It's like they programmed this section to work and that was just good enough. No real progression or ways to try and make it even slightly interesting. It all comes off as copy and pasting what works with minor at best deviations, and to me, I just feel like it's kind of lazy. Now, to be fair, your excess dog tags are collected overall and stored so that you can use them to buy rewards like music and concept art to look at. Still, despite this collectible system here with the dog tags, it does feel, again, a bit sloppy and just feels like it's the bare minimum effort that went into this. Collecting for the sake of collecting with no real substance and having the same dog tags respawn makes me not really care about hunting these things down, as there are always so many around to grab. Take almost any other platform and this is handled differently. And again, to use the DK64 comparison here, even the bananas you pick up are limited, so you're not just recollecting more and more of the same bananas. Now, I apologize if it seems like I'm harping here, but it just feels like something else could have been done to make it somewhat interesting, but it wasn't, as aside from the unlocking of the levels, these dog tags play no other function in the actual story itself during the course of the main single player gameplay. There are no power-ups or anything like that, so to speak, in the game, so the dog tags that you collect over and over will literally just unlock the next levels.
All right, here's the show notes. Oceanland is a tourist attraction, research facility, and headquarters of a high-tech shipping fleet. Lately, several ships have disappeared, and witnesses have spotted something they call the Ghost of Redbeard, a pirate captain they think is responsible. When the other boats vanish, his ghostly ship has been spotted right off these very piers.
Fascinating.
Yeah, like in a really spooky way.
Yeah, spooky.
Each of the 5 cases you will attempt to solve are all reimaginings of classic Scooby-Doo episodes, which I think is a pretty cool concept. One of my personal favorites being the ghost astronaut villain. Unfortunately, he doesn't get the laugh in this. You know the one. even when you're being chased, and I think that that's kind of lame because going to the effort of letting us sort of replay these classic episodes kind of feels hollow when little defining details are just kind of left out. Still, each case essentially follows the same formula. You'll have a hub world with 3 levels that you can unlock to play. These 3 are always the same, with one being an exploration level, another is a chase, which includes the case villain, and finally a vehicle level, which is usually just you getting to the end while being chased by another vehicle, but sometimes level can have a slightly different variation. As an example, at the candy factory, you'll need to essentially pop the tires to end the level. In each level, you'll have the ability to grab clues, which are these magnifying glasses here. Now, you don't need to collect all of the clues to complete a level, but you will need the clues in order to accuse a suspect. Well, kind of. I'm not sure if it's just that each level has a set amount you absolutely need to pick up or what, but I ran into a situation during the second to last case where I was missing 2 clues, but I clearly knew who the culprit was. So I had to go back to the level where I was missing a clue to collect it. The game also doesn't tell you which levels you're missing clues from unless you enter the level. That can be very frustrating, but it gets worse as I imagine I missed out on the clues because there is another issue that can compound the frustration in this game when it comes to collecting these things. This is where if you pick up a clue and immediately die afterwards, you'll need to re-pick that clue back up. However, in one situation in particular, during the final case, I was placed right in front of the clue facing away from it after I had died, so I didn't know I had to re-pick it up. It wasn't until I was halfway done with the level and had picked up the second clue that I realized that I was missing one. Then I thought back to the other levels where I thought I was missing a hidden clue or something, only to recheck my footage and realize that I had died from one of the wonky platforming sections, which I'll talk about in a bit, and realized that's where I lost the clue. It's very annoying, and you won't realize that this is happening until at least a couple of levels into the game. The checkpoint system, although being somewhat fair, it doesn't feel like it works completely well, especially with the whole clue system. But anyway, once you've gathered clues and levels, you'll head back to the mystery machine in order to analyze the clues and start piecing together who the culprit could be. Matching clues with suspects actually kind of reminds me of the Dick Tracy NES game, albeit here it's a bit more involved as you'll need to analyze the clues first in a series of mini games in order to determine suspects the clues might relate to. From there, you'll need to match the clues which could pertain to certain people before matching and accusing who you think the villain of the level is. And oftentimes the clues will actually have multiple people that can be associated with said clue. One cool aspect that I have to give the Scooby-Doo wiki credit for is that up until the final case, who the perp could be is completely random. So it gives you a fresh feeling as to who and why the perp is doing what they're doing here. There is one slight downside to this, and that's the reveal. While cool that the first 4 levels are always random, again, it looks really cheap and sloppily thrown together, like many other aspects of this game. Mainly because the perp's already unmasked, so you don't even get the trademark unmasking sequence till the very last chapter in the game, but everyone's just kind of standing around awkwardly. And at times the characters will be in these really weird poses. Admittedly, I played this one via PPSSPP emulation, so I don't know if this is an emulator issue or if this was also an issue on hardware, so if anyone knows, let me know in the comments below. Circling back to the minigames, there are multiple minigames, and what minigames you'll need to play to analyze the clue is based off the item you're using. Don't worry, the game will tell you whether or not it's for a specific machine. There are 3 minigames with a variation for each that unlocks as you progress further into the game. There is a match the button presses minigame. There isn't much else to this one, you just have to make sure you press whatever's on screen before it goes away. Next, there's one where you'll need to time 2 separate lines to ensure they both land within the box. I didn't realize this till later, but by pressing the D-pad, you can actually switch which box you need to press this in. Truthfully, I rarely found myself doing this, as it's just as easy to wait it out if you miss the button presses the first go around. And the final minigame is that by tapping the L and R buttons, you'll need to keep these little signal bars down. I found the easiest way to deal with this one is to initially get all the bars down as quickly as possible, then leave my cursor in the middle. Each of these games gets slightly harder as you progress through the cases, but nothing unmanageable, really, until the final case. There, the minigames can be a bit more challenging, especially the button pressing ones, but again, it's doable. However, I could see a lot of younger kids having trouble here, especially with the difficulty curve being pretty brutal by the very last chapter. Still, the novelty of these games do wear off pretty quick though. You'll be getting roughly 16 clues in each case, meaning you'll need to complete these clue analysis minigames at least 16 times, if you collect them all in the stages per case. You can mitigate this by completing the clue analysis after each level that you do, but it's it's really just shuffling around the work. I guess you could technically go after specific clues once you know which pickups in-game go to which clue. That way you can speed through the cases. However, this would require you to map out each clue in each level over multiple playthroughs, and I'm not about to do that again. And the other thing is that these clues might be random, like whoever the perp is. So you really have no choice but to collect all the clues and then name the perp afterwards. So even if you wanted to try to get through these quick, that might not even be possible. Now, to be fair, these sections aren't bad, but after a while it gets tedious and just kind of boring, to be honest. Kudos for doing something that adds the detective element there, but it gets very old very quickly. As far as controls are concerned, Scoob is able to jump with X and perform a double jump pressing X again. Keep in mind there is a slight delay when pressing X to jump either time. If you press square after performing a double jump, Scoob will initiate a belly flop attack. If you press circle, Scoob will eat a Scooby snack which replenishes his health and gives him a slight buff against enemies, and allows him to take out these ghost enemies he would otherwise be defenseless against. Pressing square will lead Scoob to perform a Crash Bandicoot style spin attack. It's considered the weakest of Scoob's attacks, and it's mostly used to take care of vermin type enemies. Scoob also has the ability to kick by pressing circle and X, and doing a slide attack by pressing square and X while running, both attacks being significantly stronger than the spin. I do think it's nice that Scoob has extra attacks, but I kinda wish the kick was just relegated to the triangle button. You only use that button to talk to people, and I never found an instance where that would be a conflicting issue. This isn't just to make the attacks easier to do, but it conflicts with the Scooby snack button, which is circle. So you'll accidentally eat Scooby snacks a lot of the times when just trying to perform the kick. Now, to be fair, I rarely found myself in a situation where I didn't have a lot of Scooby snacks or could easily find them, but it was a little annoying trying to kick an enemy but instead wasting a Scooby snack at full health against one enemy. Again, sounding like a broken record here, but it just comes off a bit sloppy when it didn't need to be that way at all. Instead of rebalancing and configuring the controls, the solution was just add a bunch of extra Scooby snacks, and while I guess that fixes the issue, it makes the game less fun to play. Now, at first you'll probably think that there is a nice variety of enemies here, and visually yes, each stage has different enemies to face. However, you'll soon realize that there are only 3 types of enemies. The smaller ones, which are like rats or crabs, which can be defeated without a Scooby snack, a medium-sized enemy that can shoot a projectile, which needs a Scooby snack to be defeated, finally the culprit of the stage, who can be defeated in a level, but I was only able to do so by accident here in this chase sequence. While it's nice that they kept the theming consistent for the cases you went to, I would have preferred more variety in terms of enemy types you face, instead of the same enemies just with models swapped. The hit detection and collision is kind of all over the place here. Some of it's pretty good, and others not so great, especially when you're platforming. There are instances where it can look like you can just walk onto a platform only to fall through and die, whereas other occasions it's okay. Jumping onto things is off too, and there will be times where you'll die and start thinking that you're just playing the game really bad, only to realize that no, the hit detection and collision is just slightly off. It's not the worst I've ever had to deal with playing a game, but it happened enough that I did end up taking note of it more often than not. And just to get out of the way also as a side note, there is no multiplayer here as I kind of expected. But in general, and again on a surface level, the gameplay loop does work here, and I think in any other game this could have been a lot of fun with a lot of creativity. However, it just all kind of feels like a facade of something good rather than something actually good. And I know I've already said it a lot here, but it just feels like a lot of wasted ideas. Take, for example, this sort of sneaking mechanic in the first level. You can quite literally just say screw it, and it doesn't really have any bearing on playing the game. The ideas presented in the game in theory work, but the execution is just so lazy, and I know the argument is that it's aimed at kids, but I don't know. I think kids are a lot smarter and deserve better than just hastily made products for their parents to buy. This game is actually kind of a lot like Scooby-Doo villains when you think about it, because on the surface everything looks the part, but underneath it's something else entirely. Now for me though, the weakest aspect of this game, and that is saying a lot, but that's that the level design is pretty bad here. Oftentimes you're going in a straight line, but there are these random deviations that more often than not lead to nothing aside from a few extra dog tags or a Scooby snack. But these are pointless to grab because both are plentiful if you stick to the main path. The platforming here is also very rough. Scoob has a delayed jump, so that's something you're gonna have to get used to. However, what compounds the frustration is that the platforms you'll be platforming on here can move a bit fast at times, and Scooby-Doo either feels too big or just not meant to be the one platforming here. Not to mention the collision here is super weird. You'll never quite feel like you're landing correctly, as you'll constantly feel like you're undershooting or overshooting a jump. Even on stationary platforms, you'll be on the edge wondering if you're going to make it or end up falling into a death pit. Now, to be fair, in certain circumstances, undershooting can lead to Scoob grabbing onto whatever he's jumping on, and it does seem like it happens a decent amount of the time. However, again adding to the sloppiness of the game, Scoob will grab onto a ledge, clipping himself through whatever floor the platform happens to be on, in the process again leading to that just overall slop kind of feeling. Enemy placement is also super random here. There will be either nothing to contend with save for one or two enemies, or there's just so many enemies and obstacles to contend with that you're quite literally going to be flying around the room as you're getting tossed here and there by pots, pans, enemies, villains, and everything in between. It feels like the devs had a few simple ideas that could have worked, but the execution was just not great, instead opting to just throw as much stuff in there at once, hoping that the sheer amount of stuff would outshine the actual quality of the experience. And to make it all worse, each level seems to go on forever, especially the chase sequences, and I'm not kidding, and this will ultimately turn off a lot of people. Levels are long and winding with, as I mentioned before, random paths that lead to nothing. You'll say to yourself, oh, maybe there's a clue down there, and you'll want to check it out because these levels are so long, you're not going to want to play them again just to come back for a missing clue or two, only to realize, no, this area was completely pointless. Sure, having a long level in a video game isn't necessarily a problem, and I can absolutely acknowledge that, but even the devs realize how long these levels are because the cameraman who acts as your save point shows up all the time for you to save your progress as you journey through these levels. I guess one of the saving graces here is that luckily you can tell how far along a level you are, as the GSI group act as pseudo indicators of how far you are. Essentially, after you've ran into the fourth member of GSI, you'll know you're almost done. Sure, there are dog tags that you can grab, but these things are so plentiful in level like I mentioned, and in the actual levels they don't count towards your outside tally to unlock different levels that you don't need to go off exploring to get more. It's not even really tedious, it just feels like a waste of time. Juxtaposed to the really long and mostly empty levels is the culprit catching sequence, where you'll need to effectively press a switch in 3 different spots in a straight line to capture them. I get it's supposed to emulate the show, but this is kinda ridiculous. Most of these levels are long and drawn out and don't feel rewarding at all, only to finally go up against the perp and you're expecting like a boss fight or something like that, just for it to be unrewarding and the most anticlimactic thing ever. Not to mention again, but the sloppiness rears its ugly head, as after you capture the culprit, they're already standing there like I mentioned before without their mask, and again usually in this weird and waving pose. The game says they're unmasking the culprit, but we don't get to see it. Instead, they just kind of awkwardly stand around and give their dialogue. I'm so confused because they couldn't make cutscenes of the perps being unmasked, but they made cutscene intros to every other level in the game. I feel like there was supposed to be a PS2 version or something of this game, because a lot of this stuff just seems super lazy for the sake of lazy. Almost like they had all these assets, went through the development, and the flagship game got pulled at the last second. But the handheld ports were far enough along where they just decided to release those in whatever state that they were in. Speaking of lazy, just to kind of hammer this home, on the 4th case Oceanland, there's a level where you have to guide Velma along a straight path because her glasses are gone. You need to pull on levers in order for her to walk safely across platforms. Well, if you look closely, she has her glasses on. The devs couldn't even take 15 minutes to render the model without the black lines around her eyes. I do know that I'm harping on this section in particular because it simultaneously has all the problems presented to the game that I've complained about so far. An overly long section with a faux sense of variety that barely works but still looks mostly visually pleasant. But funny enough, the section isn't even super long, but it's drug out because Velma will just randomly fall off the side even if you place the sections down with enough time. I'm guessing the trick is to stay close to her and drop these down within a sweet spot for timing, but even then the game will still mess this up and you'll just randomly lose with her falling off the side of the platform that she's not even close to when it came to putting down the actual place for her to walk on.
This sucks.
Then, when you inevitably lose, the whiplash respawn will catch you off guard so badly, and you'll need to regain your bearings before you even realize what's happened. It's not necessarily the worst section in the game overall, but it hammers home what makes this whole thing unpleasant and just such a negative experience overall. Alright, so major spoilers from here. The culmination of all 4 cases leads Mystery Inc. to the Winter Hill side of Wolf's End Lodge, where the recently fired GSI team happens to turn up, leading to suspicion that the Ghost Haunter Hunter could be the now disgraced team. However, after an avalanche caused by the Ghost Haunter Hunter occurs, we see the Mystery Inc. team spring into action to capture the perp, who is none other than the TV producer guy. Yep. Definitely didn't see that one coming.
But that's just plain nuts! Many of you out there are thinking, right?
Now, it is kind of funny. He does bring up a pretty logical point, though, in that he hasn't really committed a crime as he was just boosting ratings. However, to counterpoint this, because of the avalanche, he can be tried with that. It just kind of sums up my whole feeling of this game. Very rushed. All this felt like it was made for a cheap and easy buck. Funnily enough, though, there is a secondary twist in that the producer guy is actually Old Man Higgins that I didn't see coming, and credit where it's due, it's kind of funny, if not, somewhat pointless. When looking over my notes, I noticed the word sloppy repeated over and over and over, and that's because this game really is the embodiment of that, and in a lot of ways the definition of wasted potential. Scooby-Doo Who's Watching Who received a 54 critically, and as for the user score, it received a 7.4, which, man, I just don't personally agree with. I do think nostalgia would play a lot into this, and if you enjoyed it, hey, that's great and I respect that, but for me, I gave this game a 3. I just did not enjoy this one at all. The worst part of it honestly being that this game has a lot of potential, but none of it ever gets past the bad quality. Personally, I didn't expect to go into this one disliking it as much as I did. As a matter of fact, I enjoyed myself the first few minutes, and I thought it could have been a hidden gem on the handheld. However, the more I played, the more I kind of felt like I was wasting my time. Sure, some things worked here, but it was just so sloppy in a lot of parts that honestly, I'd rather play through Napoleon Dynamite again. Because that at least had a multiplayer function that was, kind of fun, and the game, despite being bad, had that so bad it's good charm quality that this did not. Not to mention that, for the most part, all of the little mini games in Napoleon Dynamite work and don't feel completely sloppily put together. So congratulations, Napoleon, you are no longer at the bottom of the PSP list. At first I thought this Scooby-Doo game had a lot going for it, but the more I played, the more I just did not enjoy this one. Unfortunately, a lot of the time the game just has this cheapy vibe to it at best and a sloppy vibe at worst, which holds it back from being anything close to special. With more time in development and a lot, and I mean a lot, of extra polish, I think this would and should be a great concept for a game. However, as it stands now, it just kind of comes off as a knockoff Sly Cooper game. Specifically the first game, and I think even then I'm giving this game way too much credit. Still, I could see this being one of those games where if you played it when you were younger, you could have some sort of nostalgic attachment to it. And like I always say, I don't go into these with the expressed intent of being negative. This just kind of happens to be one of those times, unfortunately, where it just didn't turn out to be a good game for me. Still, what do you think? Did you enjoy Scooby-Doo Who's Watching Who? Are there better Scooby-Doo games out there? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe, and as always, thanks for stopping by the PS Pub. And I'm going to get myself a Mickey's after this one.